Thank you, John, for the introduction. As you said, my name is Keith Wood. I've created this virtual reality simulation, and I know some of you have already had a go on it. I hope some more of you will before the day is out. The subject of what I'm going to talk about is how you recreate the Great Exhibition, or rather how I have recreated the Great Exhibition. A little bit more about me. I retired at the end of 2022 after 40 years designing software and managing projects. But this is not a techno-babble talk. This is about the research to know what was where, what it looked like, where the bits and pieces are now if they exist, that sort of thing. So I'm going to start straight off with some contemporary documentation. And many of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with this book. It's one volume of the official catalogue. There's 3 volumes, roughly this size. Full of, it's the official descriptive and illustrated catalogue. It's got an entry for each exhibitor with a description of what they exhibited, and some of them have engravings of the items exhibited. There was also a 4th volume which is slightly smaller, which was like an addendum for stuff that wasn't in the first publication. There's also, someone's actually got over there, a wonderful book, and I'll read the title, The Building Erected in Hyde Park for the Great Exhibition of the Works of Industry of All Nations, 1851. It's folded out with many of the illustrations which give you detailed plans, not only the elevations of the building, it's also got various components in quite great detail, and the text gives you very detailed measurements of all the components that made up the building. So the building, relatively easy. The catalogue, as I've said, covers what was exhibited. There's also this massive tome, which is 6 months of the Illustrated London News. This is the second half of 1851, which is thicker than most because there were so many Great Exhibition supplements that were included. I'll just pick out a couple of pages which I've flagged. That one. You'll see here views of the inside of the building in 2 different directions. There's many more of these. I'm not going to go through all of them, obviously, because of the time. And probably the most important ones are the so-called panoramas, which many of you have probably seen in the past. They did this for the entire naval transept from sometime late in 1851 through to 1852, covering the whole of the naval transept. I'm not going to cover any more of that book because we could be stuck in that for ages. That was my script going on the floor. Right, okay. So there's other publications as well. We have thousands of engravings, hundreds of watercolours and many photographs. And that has enabled me to work out where things were, what they looked like and how they were arranged. And that's both close-up views of the exhibits and the wide angles. And indeed, many of the close-up views of the exhibits have little clues in the background that you can see where they were. There's one, for example, of a lathe, and there's one of the outside doors there. And then there's floorboards. And you think, well, the floorboards on the ground floor ran north to south, so that must be a north or a south wall, and how many doors are there in the north or south wall, etc., that sort of thing. So it's possible to locate these quite accurately. There's also detailed floor plans. I mentioned just now volume 4 of the catalogue. In the front of that you'll see a detailed floor plan that was drawn up by Royal Engineers. But not only has the layout of the building, it shows the railings around the outside of the building that enclosed it, and it shows many of the stands and exhibits and labels them. So therefore we know exactly where in the building they were, and you can probably trust Royal Engineers to do a pretty good job of that. The original of that is just down the road at the 1851 Commission Archive, and they very kindly gave me an extremely high resolution scan of that, which has helped immensely. Right. However, many of these exhibits are mentioned in name only. No illustrations, nothing else in the contemporary documentation. How do we deal with that? Well, when it comes to sculpture, this has been an extremely useful reference book by Rupert Gunnis' Dictionary of British Sculptures. Not just British-born sculptors, but British sculptors who worked in Britain. So it includes Raphael Monti, it includes Carlo Marichetti, for example. They're written in 1951, originally covering 1660 to 1851. This is the second edition, which I think was 66, which is updated. It has not just a list of the sculptures, but where they were or if they're lost. Of course, where they were then when the book was written, of course. Some of them are still there, some of them moved on a bit, some sadly have since been lost. One example being Edward Davis's Venus and Cupid, which was in Salford Museum until 1958, until something happened to it and it was destroyed. But they did send me some wonderful photographs of the piece in their galleries, from which I had a model commissioned. And then locomotives. There were 13 full-size steam locomotives in the Great Exhibition, 10 British, 2 Belgian and 1 French. And for British steam locomotives, this is the Bible, basically. People who are into railways seem to be really keen to record it and write books about it. This was, I don't know when this was published, it's quite a long time ago I think, a guy called Aarons, but it's basically the Bible on steam locomotives, lots of illustrations of the locomotives that were at the Great Exhibition. And 3 or 4 of them I think were so-called Crampton style locomotives, for which this is the Bible. The Crampton style, in order to get very, very large driving wheels and a very low centre of gravity, the Crampton design was to put the driving wheels at the back, so you could put the boiler low in front of it. 3 or 4 of the locomotives at the Great Exhibition are covered by that. So there's that. Right, so some items are lost, as I already mentioned, and have to be modelled from scratch. I have a very friendly modeller in Argentina who does models for me. I've had 6 or 7 done now, I think. Unfortunately, that's all I can afford at the moment. They cost sort of $80 to $120 a piece. I've got 150 still to get modelled. So if anybody'd like to sponsor one, see me afterwards. Other lost items, if I've got an illustration, I'll model it from scratch. And similarly, items that I can't really get to. I was made aware of something a while back that's in New Zealand. And it's in a museum in New Zealand, and they got it, and they sent me photographs, and I used that to generate a model myself. And that will be in, probably not the next release, but the one after. But what have we actually found things that still exist? Well, we want to photograph them with photogrammetry. This is where you take several hundred photographs from just about every direction and then feed it into a very clever computer program, and out pops a model. That's oversimplified it. Typically it takes several hours of computer processing time, even on that thing, which is top of the range that you can just about get for a desktop computer. But the software is free, which is wonderful. Now some of them, I use this little devil here. Someone I think was looking at, you were looking at the Marquis of Bute in Cardiff, weren't you? The big statue at Callahan Square in Cardiff, which we use this for. The base of that statue is 5 metres off the floor, and the top views were taken from 20 metres up. So this proved invaluable. We also used it Northern Hay Gardens in Exeter for Edward Stevens' Deer Stalker. We used it at the Colbert Bell Museum of Iron for John Bell's Boy and Swan Fountain, and we've probably used it somewhere else that escapes me at the moment. Unfortunately, there are places that won't let you fly drones. One obvious example is not far from here in Old Palace Yard, in the Palace of Westminster. Many of you have already mentioned to me you're familiar with Richard Coeur de Lion, Baron Carlo Manichetti's statue in Old Palace Yard, which is now the House of Lords car park, and obviously behind the security barrier. It took a long time to get permission to get in there, and they certainly don't allow drones. So in order to get over the problem of having to get the camera 8 metres up in the air, I bought a flagpole in 8 1-metre sections, jury-rigged a camera holder to the top of it, worked out how to get the camera to operate as a Wi-Fi hotspot, and my lovely glamorous assistant was standing next to me with a tray with a laptop on it, showing me what the camera was looking at while I was holding this and going around trying to control an 8 metre tall pole. It got easier as it went lower, of course. We've also had to use that in Place Royale in Brussels for Godfrey's Bouillon, because that's outside the Royal Palace and they don't like drones there either. we used it in Leicester Marketplace for Duke of Rutland, which is no longer there because they're demolishing it and they put it into storage, but we got there just in time. Most models, though, thankfully, just require a simple tripod, which is much easier. They're more accessible, shall we say. There have been some challenges, and a couple of you, I've shown Giotto, the young Giotto drawing, the guy sitting there with the drawing tablet, and I mentioned how difficult it was to do that. That's in a museum, the name of which escapes me, in Mechelen in Belgium, and it's in their storeroom. And it was on a shelf. And if I stood on my tiptoe, I just about reached the bottom of the shelf. And it was on a corner, so one side on the front, dead easy. Monopod, up it goes. But the other side, on the back, we had to put a horizontal, in fact this is the horizontal boom we use that I've attached the notice to. So we have a monopod horizontal boom out sideways, that extends to about 1.5 meters, so you can get down the side and down the back of the awkward to get to stuff. That one took 4.5 hours to photograph it. And we then left rather late and had to dash to Paris, as I recall, and we missed our dinner because we had to get to the hotel in time. So there are challenges. Having said that, we have been to some amazing places. We've been in the Palace of Westminster in parts that the public don't normally get to go to. We did a William Follett in Westminster Abbey, and they let us in after the public had gone, and we were serenaded by Westminster Abbey choir practicing while we were photographing. That was absolutely marvellous. The furthest we've travelled is Sonneberg in southeastern Germany. I think somebody here saw Gulliver in Lilliput. If you haven't and you want to see it, it's a lovely little thing about so long and so wide, Gulliver lying down, tied down with all the Lilliputians climbing over him. Part of the toy exhibit from Sonneberg, which is Toy Town basically. It was full of cottage industry of toy makers. We've been to University College Oxford, the Poynton Reading Room of their library, where the statue of Eldon and Stowell is, a massive statue of the two brothers. One of the last works of most great Lithwaite Watson, who died in 1848. In actual fact, it was finished by his assistant, George Nelson. And another one of his pieces, his very last piece, is in University College London, a statue of John Flaxman. So we've done that. We've been to the Hancock Museum in Newcastle with the stuffed birds, and we're allowed into the stalls there to photograph some of them. We went to St Chad's Cathedral in Birmingham, that was only 2 or 3 weeks ago. The memorial to Bishop Walsh, which was designed by Augustus Pugin, same guy who did the work in windows in Palace of Westminster. So that's it really, we've just found the places, been to them, photographed them, made the models, keep on researching. Oh, the one thing I didn't mention, Facebook is wonderful. I know it's got its problems, but it's learnt that I'm interested in the Great Exhibition. So whenever anybody posts that they've got something about the Great Exhibition, it pops up in my feed. I then check whether they're correct or not. Often they're not, but if they are, I can then get a model or at least get photographs of it. That's how I got the New Zealand thing the other day. So that's it. Please do try it out. And remember, it is and always will be free. The only way I can get access to many of these things is on that condition, so it will be. That's it, that's all I've got to say, unless anybody has any questions. Okay, I retired at the end of 2022. I spent the first half of 23 looking into and learning how you program for VR. I mean, I already had the kit. My son visited us about 10 years ago with his kit. We played with it over Christmas. His family did. Well, that's good, I'll get one of them. So I got the same kit. And then I thought I'll learn how to do it. I found it was relatively easy to do. And then I needed a project. And the thing that gave me the idea was I came across a group of people, I can't remember exactly when, but sometime during that first half of 23, a group of people who were recreating the World Trade Center in New York. And I thought that's quite a good idea. Not the World Trade Center, I mean, that's great for them, but for me, recreating a lost building. Yeah. And it didn't take very long to come up with the idea of the Great Exhibition. My parents used to go on about it all the time. They were sort of quite old when I was born, so they had a sort of traditional patriotic British view of empire and what have you. So they always said it was a wonderful thing, and so I knew of it, knew very little about it. But I then discovered it's pretty well documented. It's old enough to be out of copyright, which is brilliant. And that's it. I thought, yeah, I can do that. Especially the modular design of the building. It only took me 6 weeks to do the build. No, when I first started, I looked at Unreal and Unity. Somebody recommended Unreal, and I spent about a week and a half running through tutorials and got nowhere. I thought this is such a steep learning curve. I then went to the Unity tutorials and I had a program running in 2 hours. Very simple, it was a rotating cube. It was there in front of me and I could walk around it, and if I touched it, the hand reacted to it. So I thought, well, if it's that easy to do that, you know, they've made a good development environment. So yes, Unity was the way I went. For the photogrammetry to produce the models, I use something called reality capture, which used to be chargeable, but it was bought by the people who do Unreal and made free about a year and a bit ago. So that's great. That's all free as well, apart from actually getting the photographs. For modelling the stuff I do myself from scratch, I use SketchUp, but I use version 8. I use Blender for some of the more intricate stuff, but it's another steep learning curve. I've learned the bits I need to learn and go back to SketchUp when I don't need those bits. But those are the main tools, so those three. Oh, I've got about 1/3% of the exhibits done. I've worked out. But I've gone for the bigger ones. The Great Hydraulic Press, which is the huge thing that lifted the box sections over the Menai Strait for the Britannia Bridge, that was finished in 1850, and they had this press that no one needed. Oh, we'll explain that at the Great Exhibition. That's one exhibit. Somewhere else, a little screw is one exhibit. So one exhibit is anything from that to that. But there was 100,000 exhibits roughly, and I've got 387. I think at the last count. Yeah, so it's a long way to go. What I've seen of artificial intelligence YouTube videos about the Great Exhibition, absolutely not. No. They are so wrong. There may be potential if they can get working the ability to take 2D photographs and extrapolate what the 3D model was, which is different to what reality capture does. It can only work with the information it's got. If you've got part of the model masked, it can't reproduce it. If they can crack that one, then it would be useful. Any more questions? I think that's it then. Oh, well, thank you all very much.
Don't forget the simulation can now be downloaded from Steam. It is free of charge, and always will be. Although best when used with a VR headset, if you don't have a headset it will also work in desktop mode, using your monitor keyboard and mouse.